Parliament and Funkadelic. The two George Clinton-led bands, collectively known as P-Funk, had a legendary run in the 70s, recording a great catalog of albums for both bands, spawning spin-off groups like the very successful Bootsy's Rubber Band and the short-lived Brides of Funkenstein, and defining the canon of funk music and its fusion with other genres. This was as much a collective of artists, singers, songwriters, and musicians as it was a band. You had an expanding cast, with more member turnover nearing the mid-70s. The imagery and characters built out of the P-Funk universe were also key. The costumes, the sci-fi themes, the nicknames, the reputation, the X-rated concerts, the psychedelic leanings, this all added to the mystique. The formation of Parliament and Funkadelic is also interesting because they started in the early 50s as a vocal doo-wop group called the Parliaments in Plainfield, New Jersey, and they would rehearse in Clinton's barbershop. The members were George Clinton, Ray Davis aka Stingray, Calvin Simon, Grady or Shady Thomas, and Clarence Fuzzy Haskins, who just passed away in 2023. Rest in peace, Clarence Haskins. They were trying to get on for years and eventually had major success with their song I Wanna Testify, which got a lot of play. The barbershop in Plainfield also attracted a lot of local musicians, and in the late 60s, Clinton put together a band to back up the Parliaments on tour. So this new band included Billy Bass Nelson on bass, Eddie Hazel and Tall Ross on guitar, Tiki Fullwood on drums, and Mickey Atkins on the keys. But when the Parliaments ran into contractual issues with their label Revelot Records, they lost the right to use the name The Parliaments for a few years. So they recorded new music with this new band, listed those band members as the actual artists, and they listed the original vocalists from the Parliaments as guests on the album. And they went with the new name Funkadelic, which Billy Bass Nelson said he came up with. So they would record a few albums under Funkadelic, and then years later they would restart the Parliaments, but would call it Parliament, and they'd continue to record several albums under each band name, and their music would evolve over time. The first 3 Funkadelic albums, the self-titled one, Free Your Mind and Your Ass Will Follow, and the iconic Maggot Brain, definitely contained some funk, but it also leaned heavily into psychedelic rock, especially with Eddie Hazel's guitar. That was mostly early 70s, whereas in the mid 70s, Parliament and Funkadelic started sounding like that signature funk sound that they're most closely associated with, a sound that they pioneered, with hits like Flashlight, One Nation Under a Groove, Not Just Knee Deep, and George Clinton's Atomic Dog. Yes, they had funk predecessors, James Brown, Sly and the Family Stone, but P-Funk modified, expanded, and reshaped the sound of funk. And keep in mind, it's mostly the same artist playing on both Parliament and Funkadelic. It's really only the name of the band that changes. The members of each are mostly the same. Now, there are outstanding albums in each of these P-Funk phases, and some of the most notable or iconic musicians in P-Funk, aside from George Clinton, are the guitarists Eddie Hazel and Gary Scheider, the bassist Bootsy Collins, who came a little later and had experience playing with James Brown, and by the mid-70s was as integral to the P-Funk sound as anyone. He really emerged during the exits of Billy Bass Nelson, Tiki Fullwood, and Eddie Hazel. Bootsy Collins would also record albums with Bootsy's Rubber Band, which had its own members, but also featured some P-Funk members on those albums. And then there's Bernie Worrell, the keyboardist whose sound is really one of the most sampled in hip-hop history. There is no G-Funk without the P-Funk, and you don't have that Death Row Records run in the 90s without Bernie Worrell's keyboard work. Just listen to Dr. Dre's Let Me Ride from The Chronic, and then listen to the last few minutes of Parliament's Mothership Connection, Star Child, from the Mothership Connection album in '75. Producers like EPMD's Eric Sermon, who also produced Redman's vintage albums, also sampled a lot of P-Funk from this era. Now, my favorite albums from the P-Funk catalog changes over time and really depends on the mood. Maggot Brain from '71 is the one that drew me in because of that Eddie Hazel guitar-dominant title track, one of the greatest guitar solos I've ever heard. Super Stupid and Can You Get to That, which was sampled by the indie band Sleigh Bells on Real Real. Those are 2 other really good songs from that Maggot Brain album. So if we're talking favorite 5 P-Funk albums, that would be 1, and my other favorite 4 right now would be Funkadelic's Cosmic Slop from '73, Standing on the Verge of Getting It On from '74, which includes Red Hot Mama, and I'll Stay, which was sampled on Crucial Conflict's '96 single Hey, One Nation Under a Groove from 78, which might be their most acclaimed and celebrated album, and then maybe Parliament's Up for the Downstroke from 74. But again, these favorites change from time to time. America Eats Its Young or Let's Take It to the Stage are often up there. By the way, Daniel Bedrosian, who's been the P-Funk keyboardist for the last 20 or so years, wrote and released this book called The Authorized P-Funk Song Reference. It's got all the P-Funk history, including who contributed to which songs, including vocally, which P-Funk had several vocalists. It wasn't just the 5 original Parliaments that were singing. A lot of the musicians sang and wrote as well. And there's always a ton of discussion and debate among who contributed to what among P-Funk fans. But I'm really glad my girl purchased this for me over the holidays last year. And shout out to Daniel Bedrosian. Sometimes we chop it up on Instagram. But let me know your thoughts on all things P-Funk. What are your 3 favorite P-Funk albums? And please give me your 5 favorite P-Funk songs. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love music like I do. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.